So tonight is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023, and this is our finance and facilities meeting. And we have everybody who needs to vote here in person. And we have one person online, our director of B&G for the schools. So I am not going to read the whole, and we're a little time constrained this evening. So I'm not going to read the whole thing about the fact that the governor says we can meet remotely, because in fact, we're all here in person. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I have, I believe, all the documents, and we're going to start with the agenda. And the agenda says the first thing on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes. So while I work on sharing my screen, I'm going to ask for someone to make a motion. I'm looking for a motion to accept our meeting minutes from our last meeting.
Second.
I got a first and a second. Thank you. First was Mr. Manzo, second was Ms. Coelho. And does anybody have any corrections, omissions?
I just have one thing. I think the very other members present, it says remote and then it lists everyone. We were here, right?
We were doing our work.
Yeah. It wasn't an entirely remote.
No.
Right? We were here.
There was one meeting we were home because of weather.
Was that it?
Right. Was that the one?
I don't know. I'm asking.
I believe that
That
is
was in
true.
January.
I believe our last meeting that we should have had, we didn't have because we didn't have a quorum.
Right.
And that the meeting before that, in January.
Was that all on Zoom? It was on Zoom.
All right, how about I will take the action item to watch the BevCam recording. And then if we need to make that correction to the meeting minutes, I will send that to Liz. With that kind of outstanding potential correction.
So actually, and then the only other thing that at the bookend of that is under also present and in person. So if we're all remote, then we're all remote. There was no one in person. So however that works its way out.
I see.
Also been development, everyone else. No.
But I think you're right. I think we were Zooming.
Yeah, I think so. Good memory.
He's
Okay, are there any other corrections to our meeting minutes? All right, seeing none, all those who vote, are we accepting the meeting minutes?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 voters this evening. That passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you. Here we go. Here is our next item on the agenda is items for approval. Because we put our voting items first so that we always make sure we get our necessary business in first.
So there are no FY23 budget transfers for the committee to approve tonight.
Fantastic, but we do have some gifts to schools.
Yes, and I did give you both reports. The January, there were no monies, so we don't really need to open that one.
Thank you.
But in the February one, we have $23.42 for royalty payments for the use of the Beverly name on merchandise that's sold in stores.
Okay, so I have that on my screen for those of you who are in the room. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was distracted because somebody else came into the room, but it's Rachel, so she can meet online and manage the Zoom meeting for us. All right, so we have one gift to school, and I'm looking for a motion to approve. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. Any questions on this particular, you know, my motto, when would we ever say no to free money? All right, there's a motion on the table, no questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
5-0, thank you. Next item on our agenda, oh gee, I keep clicking on the wrong thing. For those of you who are in the Zoom with me, I apologize. I have a new computer and my little mouse pad thingy is very sensitive. A grant acceptance.
Yes, so I have 2 DESE grants, number 215 and number 185. 215 is the Genocide Education Grant. It's a 2-year competitive grant that's been awarded to Beverly. The grant will align the curriculums grades 7 through 12 and provide professional development to the teachers. This is a new law that the district needs to teach genocide education. This year, the grant amount is $8,000.
Okay, we're gonna take these one at a time. So grant number 215, I'm looking for a motion to accept. Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Second, Dr. McKenzie, thank you. Any questions for either Dr. Chirocek or, I love that, I'm just again, so that we get more opportunities to see what the speech to text says about your name. Ms. Sherburne, about grant number 215 from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You have a question? Yes,
Sure.
Mr.
So $8,000, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. So how do you spread that out?
So it's actually a 2-year grant. So the first 8,000 is from now until June 30th for planning.
Yep.
And then there's an implementation grant. And I believe the total amount you'll accept the rest of the money next year. And I think it's $32,000.
I think so.
Yeah, so it's a $40,000 grant in total, but the 8,000 is the upfront planning part for the so actually Paul Casey had put this grant together, and he specified what the planning activities for this school year would be, and then what the implementation activities would be next year. So
When are they going to be taught? What class is this? In
um,
an advisory?
I believe no, I if Dot were here, she would know more. I know she was instrumental in that grant, but I believe the idea is to identify units of study that would be incorporated into a core, and I don't want to overspeak because I want to say U.S. history, but I don't want to say it unless I have the opportunity to confirm that. But I do believe that it's creating some units that will be implemented within existing classes. I don't know that it's a specific different class, but I don't know that for sure.
And do we think that's going to be covered in a curriculum meeting?
Oh, it will, yeah, I'm sure it will come forward in one of the CISL meetings.
So we're in a little chicken and an egg and getting the money before we have necessarily all the details?
So no, we have the plan. The plan has been submitted. DESI approves the plan, but the first part of the plan is planning. So they do that often when they put together grants. They don't just say, here's money for something that you have to plan before you get the money. So that money will cover stipends for teachers to do the curriculum development, probably some training, professional development. I know that there's professional development that is available on this through DESI. They're actually part of a cohort of communities. I think certain communities were selected for the grant. So they'll be working with the group, but that 8,000 covers the planning, and then implementation of it, I believe, is like beginning of school year next year. And then that 32,000 covers resources, any of the other materials that come.
Is this going to be a recurrent every year to be taught at a certain grade, or is this a one-time?
The idea is that you build the curriculum through this
Okay.
grant process, and then it exists and you own and you have it for beyond. So yes, I'd say the answer is yes.
All right, but how about, can you speak for half a second? And I know we're very time constrained, but the part of this grant that says this is a new law that the district needs to teach genocide education.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep, occasionally the legislature passes some portion of legislation that codifies certain stipulations for us that we have to do. And so this was part of one of those. And then DESI, usually in response, tries to figure out how do we help this be, part of our high quality implementation procedures that we do. So they offer competitive grants out to districts to be the pilot leaders of how that. So it could be that the law passed and it's by 2026, right? I don't know this one specifically. And so the Department of Ed will look for districts to pilot and put together best practices and units of study and things that will work. I'm assuming that this is, sort of like that. And I know that it was a competitive grant, so it's not we get Title I, we're entitled to that grant, right? But this is a competitive, you have to have a plan, get a group of teachers, put it together, and then come together and do the work to implement it. So that's part of this one. That's what this.
So not an entirely unfunded directive.
Correct. It's the way that it is the way that we, sort of support new mandates that come along, right? And so if you're not part of the pilot, you will be the beneficiary of the work that Beverly does in creating this. So we'll share with our surrounding communities, and that's how that works.
All right, I'm looking for any more questions. Any more questions? All right, there is a motion, right? There's a motion on the table. All those in favor of accepting this $8,000 grant? That passes 5-0. Gina, you're not in the meeting, are you? I'm sharing the descriptions of two
Yes.
15 and 185.
Okay, grant number 185 is the high quality instructional materials grant. This is to provide professional development as well as hands-on support from DESE specialists and vendors to skillfully implement recently purchased high quality curriculum materials for ELA. And Dr. Shurchak will have any information
I
you
will
want
have
on
any
this.
I'll
And
give
it's
you,
for
I'll give just a brief
71,000.
overview in the interest of time. You know, the Department of Ed, high quality implementation materials is a very big focus for the Department of Ed. Again, this is a very similar idea. We have in Beverly made some significant purchases of curricula in ELA, K-4, Wit and Wisdom. We are piloting right now at the middle school 5 through 8, and at the high school, there's teachers that are working on pilot materials for supplemental text to some of the texts that we currently use. And this is an opportunity to get some money to support professional development for teachers, stipends for teachers to do some extra work around curriculum building, being able to bring in, I know that we had Wit and Wisdom come in and do a training for our teachers and coaches on writing, writing within the Wit and Wisdom program. And so this funding is was available and we applied for it. And we were lucky to get it. So Dot is sort of the manager of this grant, and it will help us in our implementation. So some of these programs that we purchase are really comprehensive. Not only are they expensive, but they're very comprehensive, and it's a lot of work on the part of the teachers to unpack and roll out in a really thoughtful way some of that. So this money will support that.
All right, I need a motion before we ask any questions. Thank you, Ms. Coelho.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manto. Anybody have any questions about this particular grant? Yes, ma'am.
Every time I see a grant, I cringe only because I find, okay, what kind of work is this going to, the teachers have to do in order to implement something? And since I don't know what this this hands-on, I get confused, when I see hands-on, I'm curious what is it? Can you explain a little bit more?
Yep.
Let's
So
start at the high school level since this is where
yeah,
I
so
come-
we've gone through a selection process at both elementary, middle, and high school with teams of teachers around piloting new curricula, but we've purchased new curricula. So this supports the implementation of the curriculum that they're required
They already
to.
have the curricula, so this is the supplement.
Yeah.
And this is just ELA.
This particular grant is for just ELA. When the math one is out, we'll be.
Okay.
All right, I'm looking, any other questions? All right, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor of accepting this grant? 5-0. That passes. Thank you.
The next thing I have is DESE entitlement grant increases. That would be for Title I and IDEA grants, which is special education grants. So usually at this time of year, Department of Ed will say we're going to increase or decrease your grants in a particular year. So this spreadsheet is the middle column is what we're looking. We're looking for the committee to approve $8,785 for the 4 grants, grant 140, 240, 262, and 305 there. And then what I've given you is the new grant amount. So as you recall, I came in September and you approved the original amount. Now we're just looking for you to approve the increased amount.
Who wants to make the motion?
Like that.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ranzo. Any questions on these increases?
And just a little add that most of the increases did go to supplies on the 140 and the 305 for the small amounts that they were.
Dr. McKenzie, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Sherburne. That was going to be a question for me. It just seems like the title of it is a little broad. So I was trying to think about like, what are some examples of what the funding might do differently for what we already get now? So it sounds like you were explaining that.
Right. So I do not recall on the 240 or the 262. I'm looking at Stacy, who I haven't introduced yet as my new assistant director of finance. We just printed out the grants. So what happens is they give us the amount, then Dot Flaherty and Bethany Splansky have to write their amendment, and then it gets approved. So they did choose what they would increase it what we would increase it for. And I know Dot had told me supplies in the grants 140 and the 305. Bethany has a large amount in the 240. I'm going to guess that it was probably contracted services is
I'm
where,
almost positive.
where she would put those two, because both of those grants work with contracted services to apply, so get students, contracted services to students.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you it wasn't a new line and a new item.
Any additional questions on these grant increases? All right, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor? 5-0. My favorite recording secretary down at the end. Jean, you want to take that little sidestep now?
Okay.
You want to do your introduction?
Sure, we did have the buildings and grounds report, but I can, have you go into the, admin and, because we do have Mr. Shirley online with us. If there's any questions on the, report, he can speak about that, but he is going to be speaking about my second item on my update. So I'll do my update.
Okay, let me open it. Hold on a second. All right, so in general, I'm just gonna remind everybody, we get the B&G update, and if you have any questions, I had some questions today, and so I emailed them to Jean, and then, you know.
She emails them to Mr. Shirley, to get the answers if I do not know the answers.
And we get the answers, we maybe discuss them at the next meeting, or maybe we just get our answers via email. And at some point in time, we will have B&G in as our main guests for a given meeting, just like we have transportation and one of
special
our
education.
meetings and special education, et cetera, et cetera. So in the unfortunately, to some extent, unfortunately, for the sake of time, we don't really have time to go through all of the B&G report at every single one of our meetings. So we take that particular part offline. Okay.
Lorinda and Jean, I'm here now. If I did get your email, and if I could answer those right now if you'd like, or just reply to Jean. It's up to you.
How about we reply, or we table that till the end, and if we have time, that's very kind of you. I would love to hear your answers, but we need to get through the other items first.
No problem.
Then we always have the email as a backup for you and I, right?
Perfect.
Okay, Gina,
Sounds good.
opening your update.
So my update, the things that I plan to talk about tonight was the introduction of my Assistant Director of Finance, Stacy Bonsang, which I love her last name, so I do put a little pronunciation on it. We're gonna have Mr. Shirley online to talk about the middle school turf outdoor learning center area. I'll have an FTE update, and when I was introducing Stacy, I was talking about Munis upgrade, and I was like, well, I don't even think I've mentioned that to the school committee. So I have a little brief about that. So the first thing is here's Stacy. She's the Assistant Director of Finance. She's been with, she has over 8 years of experience with 2 other school districts with human resource, grants, and finance expertise. And she joined us on February 13th, just before I went on vacation. And she handled everything in the office for me. And she's made a great difference in training our administrative assistants with the new Munis upgrade, which took place. I just want to welcome her, and I asked her to come to the meeting tonight. She is not going to have to come to the meeting every month, but I did say that she's going to help me prepare a lot of the information. So as you know, I really need some of that information.
Most fantastic, welcome.
Thank you so much.
So I think one thing I'd like to do is just let everybody tell Stacy who you are, because I've been saying to everybody as they're coming in. So we have Lorinda Visnick is school committee member. Kim Coelho, school committee. We have Juliana, she is the former math teacher, and she's a citizen rep. Paul Manzo, former school committee member, and citizen rep. And then we have Kenan McKenzie, Dr. McKenzie. And then we have our recording secretary, and I've introduced you to Mr. Rotondo, city council. And Ms. Abel is our guru in this thing, but in council president on the rest. And you know, Dr. Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the extent of that. I have Mr. Shirley online. I know it's kind of difficult a little bit to hear him on the way we have it set up. So I'll read this slide, and then he can talk about, the issues. How's that sound, Bob?
Sounds great.
Okay, so the courtyard and the outdoor classroom area, right outside our window here is approximately 11,720 square feet. And the reason that we're bringing this proposal, which we're not bringing it as a vote, but more educational to the committee, is due to the heavy foot traffic across the ground that gets compacted in the soil, is preventing oxygen and nutrients to the grass, causing it to die off. We've had a lot of strong rains and foot traffic that's washed away the landscape, and we kept for the last 2 years trying to mulch it and do everything. We're finding it's just not working. So he's proposing that we put in a synthetic turf that would allow proper rain and runoff. And on my next slide that everybody should have received is the green areas where Bob is proposing that. So Bob, I'll let you add whatever else you want on that.
Thanks, Jane. So yeah, this proposal has been kind of in the works for a little while now. The administrators at the school would like to use this area a little more for outdoor classroom. The students, when weather permits, use a space to eat lunch out there. And one of the tough parts is when students go from the CAF out to the turf, the field, they're constantly walking across the grass, right? So it's difficult for us to grow grass there, or nearly impossible. So one solution that we thought of was, why don't we try and turfing the space so it could be used for more purposes, right? When we have outdoor concerts there, it's not muddy for families and students. So this is one thing that we're trying to look at to utilize the space a little better. That gets a lot of use as is. Just it's a difficult design with the slope going down.
So Bob will have to go out to bid. We did do a preliminary quote guess, I guess I would say. A couple of years ago, we started talking about it, and it's going to be running approximately 130,000 or more based on what cost is today. And Dr. Shortcheck and I have met talking about funding, and we're planning on using our building rental revolving account that has a balance enough to cover this for that purpose. So we do have the funding for it. I'm looking to just educate. I don't think we really need to have a vote. We're really not changing the landscape. We're just putting new surface on it.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
Being Italian, why don't we go stone and it's for forever instead of the artificial turf?
One of the reasons we need a permeable surface for rain runoff around large buildings. So when architects design buildings, they have to design greenscapes and green spaces. So if we go with hard surfacing, say we're asphalt or stone or whatever it may be, it's non-porous. So then the rain would just kind of trickle down and run off and wouldn't seep into the ground.
And that would be a problem if it just runs off. I mean, it's like we do at home, you make it run off, and you have a driveway, you let it run off into some grassy area so it gets watered. I don't know.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think permanent, less maintenance, easy to clean.
I'm trying to think about, isn't this building, maybe Mr. Manzo, I'm gonna look at you, and when the drainage that had to be inserted underneath this building because we're on a whole bunch of clay. And that if we were doing that, right, if you kind of just look out there, and if it were running off and running down, then it would run into the parking lot. And I'm just trying to think about whether, I actually want to stand up and go look out the window. I'm a visual learner.
So I also think that this area is widely used for, playing recess. It's a recess area for some of our 5th and 6th graders when they're out for recess. And so, the turf, I think, is more appealing for me in that regard, in terms of going out and sitting down and working and playing and doing some of the things. I will say that, a very original part of this stemmed from 2 years ago. a outdoor concert was happening, and it's very dangerous. So the runoff right now, the way that it peels away at the bottom, you end up it was frightening. There are gullies and stuff. So we knew we had to do something, and so we did some quick repairs on the bottom surface area, and made some temporary accommodations. But it really actually is a safety issue too. So it isn't just simply that we want to put turf down because the grass doesn't grow. There were a lot of safety factors that we took into consideration.
In the late spring and the nice weather, isn't this also the area where they put down their towels and their blankets and they sit and they have their outside learning as well?
So that might be a little softer to sit on turf than our Italian stone.
Stone is fine.
All right, and I guess my question is around, did you have your hand up, Mr. Menzo?
Well, I was just curious, we're gonna hear this again before it gets approved, so once he figures out, or
Once he
whoever
gets a
figures out,
price.
because I don't know if there's any other work you need to do associated with installing the turf, and I don't know if this turf is different than the turf on a playing field, and so are there some cost considerations, and so maybe a little bit more information before it actually, gets installed, or is this it for us?
I think Mr. Shirley is looking for us in the administration to say, go ahead, start getting the quotes so that we can see. Bob, I don't know if you would have gotten other ideas that people have come up with, or if this was like our best one. Obviously, he meets with Mr. Collins to talk about our campuses to see, but I don't know, Bob, do you have anything else to add? We're thinking you're gonna tell me, and then we have the funding and it wouldn't come back here.
Yeah, no, we looked at a multitude of ideas, but for the purpose and use of this space, this was kind of the best path forward. And like this quote is just kind of an initial exploratory quote, but we will look at different turf options, different types, what the best option would be for the space, right? So using a playing field is not necessarily the best for this situation. So we're gonna look a little further into the options we have with the synthetic turf, right? We want to look at and see how long of a lifespan that we could have to elongate that aspect of it. And so we have a little more further investigation to do, but we kind of just wanted to bring it before the committee before we go down that path.
So I hear Mr. Manzo asking for more information, and I hear you saying that it doesn't need to come back here for another vote. It doesn't need to be voted on in general.
But we could have Mr. Shirley give an update in the buildings and grounds report that would educate the. So I didn't want it to all of a sudden be there and everybody say, hey,
Yeah, right.
when did that happen?
You have your hand up. All right,
It's
so one second. So would that satisfy you, Mr. Manzo?
Yeah, and again, the other part of my question was how much site prep would you have to do to install the turf? Is it ready to go, or are you gonna have to dig up the area and provide more drainage or whatnot? So maybe that could be part of a additional report at some time.
Okay.
Yeah, we could definitely give that too. Part of the scope of work would be to grade the space and dig some of it up. Lay some stone dust down and then some cushioning underneath the turf. So yeah, we could give a full synopsis of the detailed scope of work that will occur once we finalize it.
And then we can just report that in the buildings and grounds report.
Okay, Mr. Rotund.
Just two clarification questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. One is the original quote that was stated, you said it was 2 years ago that it was stated at about 130. And I'm not holding you to the number, but I just want to make sure that's what I heard correctly. And if not,
I don't think it was 2
How
years
long ago was
it?
that, Bob?
It was within a year, Gene, but
Okay.
it was $130,000. That was correct.
So it was, do you have a limit of what you would be willing to pay above and beyond the 130? Because we know cost of goods have gone up.
Yeah, so we would decide that as it came in.
Right.
I think that was one of the things that we, when we looked at it, we know we have a safety concern and a safety issue. And so the process began in taking a look at how we would do it and what we would do. But I don't know if we have a limit, but we certainly would keep that within our consideration because we know what money we have available to be able to be used for it. So.
And of course, if the city can do anything to alleviate some of that cost, we would
Right.
ask if they could do it on our timeline.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we move on to the next item on Dean's report? And maybe Mr. Shirley gets to be set free.
Yes, yeah, Bob, we can talk about the questions that Lorinda sent and then just get that out to the committee or in another B and G report. You and I can work on that,
Yeah,
Bob.
and then you can be done for the evening.
All right, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
So the next thing that I have is, as you know, each month, it seems I'm coming with some kind of FTE update. What I'm saying when I'm saying that is that I'm not increasing FTEs, but I'm realigning them. So we had two paraprofessional positions that were ESSER funded that were unfilled this year. And we had two SPED substitute positions that were unfilled that was appropriated, funded. And what it was is we were hoping to hire two substitutes that would cover all the SPED meetings. And we weren't able to find one specific person. So we've been using our sub money. So we still are using subs, but we didn't hire. And Bethany has come forward looking for, for behavioral analyst assistant/behavior specialist, which is a little bit higher. I think Dr. Shrochek will be better on explaining it than me, but it gives us more than paraprofessional level.
So they are support positions in the same way that a paraprofessional is a support position. However, they have a little bit more training and they work specifically under the BCBAs. So for example, if a BCBA goes into a school or a classroom and is working with a teacher or a student, could be either or, and puts together a specific behavior plan, the BCB, behavioral analyst assistant, it is a very tricky name, is there to support the implementation of that behavior plan, especially as it's coming to fruition. And that's the time when it's most necessary. So rather than immediately saying we need a one-on-one aid for a particular child or in a particular classroom, this position comes in and supports and does the transitional support while we implement the behavior plan, provides supports to the teacher, provides information back to the BCBA. Our BCBAs are pretty much straight out right now. And this allows them the opportunity to get feedback. They're supervised by the BCBA. They collect data for them. They implement the plans. They provide the reporting back to the BCBA that informs any adjustments to the plan. So it's a really, Bethany came to, we've talked a lot about it. We've had a great number of particularly our youngest students, K-1, who are struggling in the transition back to school. And this, we feel, is a better way to support them and a better use of these, two of the unfilled positions. So we're hoping that we can put this into play and take a look at how this has an impact on some of the challenges that our teachers are facing.
All right, I have some questions, but I'm looking to see if anybody else has questions, so I will call on you first. Yes, Mr. Menzel.
So you had unfilled para positions and unfilled SPED positions, and I assume that's because you couldn't find the right people. What are your chances of finding 4 of these behavioral analyst assistants? I mean, are those people out there?
Yeah, there are.
Easier to find?
We believe this will be easier to fill. These are more specified roles. These positions will fall under Unit A. Much like a PTA or a CODA or a speech and language assistant. So they're a little bit more professional. They have more professional credentialing involved in them. And yes, there are people who would, that we think we can fill these much more easily because they're specified and they're in a role that people have studied for and earned credentialing for. It's not a full bachelor's program, there's the credentialing is different. But there are programs for this, and teachers that are the people who are in this role are specifically trained for that.
And are these attached to any particular building or program?
The thought right now is that we would start, that's gonna be up to Bethany. I think it's a kind of a work in progress. There's a question, one of the things is they require a certain amount of supervision by the BCBA's. So we know that they have to be associated with a BCBA, so I think they'll start with building assignments, but I don't want to make that's not a permanent, it could be there could be flexibility depending on need, from where we go.
Oh, okay, anything else before I go? All right, so thank you, Mr. Manzo, because your first question was my first question. My next question is around the monetary. Are we even? Is it an even 4-for-4 swap? Are we close?
Close.
And if
No,
it's-
but the rest would be ESSER funded. So because two were ESSER funded, ESSER can
Right.
pick up a little bit more if they're,
Two of the positions were in the
Unit A.
appropriated, and those are even swap. The two that were in ESSER, it's a little higher, but the ESSER funding is available for us to do that.
Okay. And because this is just a trade, we're not voting.
Correct.
There's no vote needed because we're not adding any positions.
right.
Right, I'm scrolling. Anybody else have any questions before I
Well,
scroll? Yes,
If you
Mr.
mentioned
Manzo.
that they're partially funded by ESSER, do they get built into the budget for next year? Or
So
do you have funding?
So
grant
the
funding?
two of them will be built into the budget, and two of them will be on ESSER, and we'll be very clear that we're being clear to all of them that they're one-year positions anyway, because we really need to see how it works and what it looks like, and what that staffing need, and whether, we've done that a lot with our ESSER funding. We've been able to put in some opportunities to see how those supports work, especially if it's something brand new that we've never done before. And so we hire, and I asked before someone else asked the question, so will we still be able to find people who are willing to come for 1 year? And the answer was yes, because these positions are often contract positions, right? So these are people who often work in a contract role, so they would understand upon hire that it was a 1-year contract that or the remainder of this year and next year. But they'd
That was gonna be
understand
my
that at
next
hire.
question.
So that we're not obligated at the end of that year, but we're also available, and then two of them, again, would be in the appropriated. We'd look to either add the other two, or also we could look to other funding, whether it's special education grant money or something like that, depending on how it works.
Go ahead.
Quick question. What percentage of the students need this kind of assistance? Is it going up? I know it's gone up a little bit.
So I don't know if I have a percentage, but I will say that we have seen a drastic increase, particularly in our K1. In terms of, there's just been a lot of challenges with students adapting in coming back. And so we know that this is a pretty consistent, this is all aimed right now at the elementary level. So, and particularly the primary grades probably, because that's really where a pretty strong need has arisen for us.
Okay. We're good? Good. Mr. Sherburne, I'm scrolling.
The
You're not
next thing I
looking,
have is
but I
the,
can kind of see what's on the screen.
yes, the next thing I have is the Munis upgrade. So as I spoke about Stacy helping us with that, I just wanted to let the committee know that the city has successfully upgraded the Munis accounting system from version 11.3 to Munis version 2019 this past month. The biggest change that I find is the financial system is the approval process of purchase orders. So over here on the school department, we did an awful lot of purchase orders versus the city side. And the city wanted to introduce the requisition phase, which is really just our secretaries will be entering requisitions that become purchase orders where they used to already be doing purchase orders. So the approval process is a workflow. So it comes from the secretary, goes to Stacy or I, and then it goes to David and Betty in purchasing. And then if it's over $5,000, it's going to the mayor and Amit at City Hall. And then once everybody approves it, then there's a purchase order number recorded. It's our safety net was already in there that they couldn't enter purchase orders if they didn't have funding. But this is something that the city wasn't as active as the school was on there. So we're piggybacking on with them. So it's really a step back that we start at the entry of requisitions. It just takes a little bit longer for the secretaries to get the purchase order number because it's going to go through those 3 stages and then they get the PO. But It seems to be going okay right now. We just need to fine tune the ones that go that extra step for approval.
All right, so Ms. Schuler, if I translate what I heard you say, that is maybe a negative. If there's more new steps, it's a little bit, you have to scoot back further in the process to then move the POs through the
Yes.
system.
Yeah,
Can
so
you give me a positive?
So the positive is that it's very good that we have it there. What we're learning is with this new system, there's more details that we can do. We can have them enter the purchase order form that they filled out and attach it to the rec, the PO. So sometimes I get POs that say office supplies. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what they're ordering. They're ordering office supplies, where now we can have them do attachments that will be more helpful. Ultimately, at the end, the city is hoping that we're going to be able to attach invoices to the system so that I could see the invoice right on the computer system, which will be really great. But we need to get some technology in line. So like our accounts payable people have a scanner, because we don't want them right now. A lot of times I have to go to the copier, scan something, rename it, put it in my file, upload it. So we're working on fine tuning that. What I want to say that with this upgrade, there's a lot of things that we want to do on the school side, more in our accounts, in our human resource and payroll department, the self-service and stuff. So we needed to get to this version first. Now that we're there, now we can start going. So Ms. Brown has been meeting with Munis and having all sorts of trainings to learn all these new things. So we're looking to automate the onboarding process so that we can have it. They're going to have the same kind of workflow process. So instead of waiting for Gene Sherburne to get something to sign, it's going to come in my email. And then I can just, look at it quickly and move it, get it moving. Of course, with anything like that, with the automation, if somebody is not in line with that, then we need to fine tune it. So what Stacy and I have done is we have a plan that if I'm not in the office and she's in the office, she's going to look at them and approve them. So we don't hold things up if I'm not available. And that would happen the same thing with the onboarding of staff. And then ultimately at the end, we're hoping that people will be able to get their pay stubs and everything electronically so that we're not
In the dark.
in the dark ages. And a lot of times we have people like, oh, I'm going to get a loan. I need my last 2 pay stubs. I didn't. So let me call somebody and ask them. And then, oh, wait a minute, how many people have lost their W-2s already? Susan Manzo will be able to tell you many. So those are the things we're hoping that'll be next year. But Erin is already on top of, what can we do with this? It's like kids in a candy store. We were like, please give us this. Now we're like, okay, well, what can we do? So I just wanted to let the committee know that we did do the upgrade, and we're happy that we were able to get that point. We will be having to purchase a little extra because the city may not want to do a certain thing that we want to do. So that we'll have to absorb that cost. But Dr. Schrochek has been all along saying, we want this feature.
We actually put a little bit of money in the budget last year. If you look back to the FY23 budget, I think we put $90,000 aside for some of the upgrade work that might need to be done. So in particular, looking to those modules around self-service, which with 1,000 employees, it's a lot of W-2s to go looking at when they lose them. So
Right. And that we will be encumbering those funds before the end of the fiscal year, because she did put them in.
Yeah.
We just got the upgrade up. So now Erin's looking to see what do we want, what do we need. So we'll be encumbering that soon.
Fantastic.
I think
knew
I
there
had
was- I knew there was some reason that we had talked about a long time ago about the fact that the schools were really much more motivated and wanted the upgrade to happen, and we were somewhat stymied, and we had to, coordinate and work with the city to get that done.
Right.
I want to remind everybody why this is a big deal.
Right.
So thank you.
And the one thing is with this upgrade that does touch an awful lot of different areas that are not just the city and the schools, but the water bills, all the other things that the city does that I don't know what they are. It really pertained to them, and they needed to make sure that this was going to be able to do what they still need to do. So there was a lot of vetting, and I'm going to say the city had spent an awful lot of hours in trainings just to make sure that everything was gonna go smooth, and it went in, and you haven't heard anything negative, I don't think, as city councils, right?
No, they don't introduce us to me. There's just, we get the alerts that they're shutting down, give us an update. So,
Right, yeah.
So,
And ultimately, we'll be able to get some more reporting that, committees want to know, sometimes when we're into negotiations, we want some kind of reporting, we can't get it. So this will give us more things. I don't think we're gonna see anything different in our world. Our expenditure report look the same. Our revenues, but Stacy and I will be able to dig in and say, okay, what more can we learn? Because that's how we operate. We want to know what else can we do. We don't like, well, that's the way we've always done it.
All right, our next
Juliana
item,
has a
No,
question.
just having worked with multiple accounting systems, that I was gonna ask about reporting, because that's the biggest nightmare. Okay, somebody wants X, Y, and Z, and you have to manually do it, so this will
Yes.
also improve the reporting.
It'll give us more. We can look at different avenues to see what we can get out. I always say that, Dr. Strochek will call me and ask me how many teachers do I have? And then
Exactly.
if I run it this way, I have this many. If I run it this way, there's still gonna be that. We just need to know exactly what,
Right.
so if you say classroom teachers, do you mean first grade, second grade, or do you mean
Right, so you
the
can
arts
sort
and
it.
this and,
Okay.
for, so this is one thing, and that's what we're looking to do. Look at the human resource area to see if we want like some position control. So Erin and I were talking about that today when I'm saying, okay, I'm swapping this for this. Well, if we had position control, somebody would have to implement that. So,
all right, so in our last few minutes here of our meeting, we have some time to go over our revenues and or expenses. And I have, if I could use my Zoom doc so I can get at I have shared on my screen, the revenue report.
yeah, so I don't see anything that I am worried about at this time on the revenues. The things that we were anticipating to come in are coming in as we thought. We're midway through the year, and I see the building rentals coming in, and we're about the halfway point there. Preschool, we actually had forecasted, we really only forecast what we have on the budget offset, and we've had some more students coming in. So, and they're paying, that gets paid monthly, so that's still coming in. And athletics, we have 2 seasons, excuse me, already posted, and obviously the spring season isn't posted in there. So the revenues, I'm comfortable with the way they're looking at this moment. As far as the expenditure report, as I say each month, if anybody has any particular questions, feel free to reach out to me. As I always say, I'm looking at the OT 275 area, which is our substitutes. And so that is on page 33.
Thank you. I'm scrolling.
And we're at 67%. So I'm fairly confident that that is going to be a good number for us for this year. But as you know, a lot of times it's the end of the school year that people have other activities and need to take time off for. We have, so that area I'm looking at, and then under SP 860, which is on page 38. That one is, that is an area that we always watch. That's our tuitions for our special education. We have a balance right now. We were able to prepay some payments last year, so I'm looking that maybe we'll be able to prepay again this year. But always this changes day to day. So as I've reported in previous months, I meet with the special education department monthly to talk about things, and we had 2 new placements just this week that we talked about. I do have the clerical person enter the encumbrance based on whatever the changes are each month, which can be tedious, but at least it gives us an actual amount. And if you look at page 36, SP 275, there's 98,798, and that's what I was talking about with using that special education money for the special education subs. An area that I always worry about is the contracted services in SP 375, which is also on page 36. It looks pretty plentiful right now at 100,000, but Kelly just said to me, I need some money moved. And I said, oh, hold off, because I need to find money in the other areas of the budget or bring a transfer to the school committee. So even though it says 100,000 there, I know she has expenses that she has to put through. And that can change, pretty much daily, as far as if somebody's moving to another district, or if we have a problem with a student, that we have to have an individual ride. Other than that, looking at page 32 and I-375 contracted services, that it shows me I only have $333 that is not spoken for, and that's our homeless transportation. So that's another area that Kelly has asked me for. So I do think that I probably will be coming to school committee next month with some kind of transfer to cover that. But again, homeless transportation can change. If a student is not, transporting, we don't pay for it.
I'm sorry, Jean, I am not keeping up. What number was homeless transportation?
And I-375,
375.
The contracted.
Yes, thank you. I was just trying to annotate it for people who are, all the people who are
watching.
playing along at home. And I was scrolling and I didn't get to that number, so.
Yep, so the budgeted amount is 363, and we haven't encumbered some of the things encumbered, but she needs to encumber more. But you know me, I don't like to over encumber, but encumber what we anticipate. And other than that, everything else looks okay to me at this time. But if anybody has any questions and wants to send me an email, we can do that. Next month, we are planning on having, it would be April, Bethany coming in with a special education update.
Okay, so we are through our agenda. We are through our formal agenda. And before I look for a motion to adjourn, so we can move down the hall to our joint meeting with the city councilors. Does anybody have anything else? Any questions, anything left on the table that we didn't hit? Any questions on that expenses report? Most fantastic. I'm looking for that motion to adjourn.
The motion.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Thank you, Dr. McKenzie, for that second. All those in favor? Dr. McKenzie, you want to stay?
It was carrying me.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Thanks, everybody.